what I want to talk to you a bit about today is how we intend to become the definitive food business. So a couple of years ago, the way that we thought about our business was we wanted to be the best food delivery experience in the world. And there's a lot of things that we've done in order to get there, some of which is just hard graft, hustle, fast growth, and some of it is highly innovative, technological innovation that has enabled us to get to where we are to date. And where we're focusing from now on is to not only be that food delivery business, but to be the definitive food business. So expanding into different verticals in the space, and optimizing different parts of the whole process to give the customer a far better experience. So just to rewind a little bit, where did we start? So I'm sure most of you remember the early days of food delivery, wave one, or we call this delivery 1.0. So not very long ago, a few years ago, it was very, very common to just have your drawer of takeaway menus at home. You might only order it once in a while for a special occasion, a Sunday night with the family, X Factor final, whatever it is. And you probably chose from 2 or 3 local restaurants that you ordered from semi-regularly. Your favorite local Chinese takeaway, Domino's, your local Indian place. And the way that it worked back then was you'd call up your local takeaway, you'd place an order, you'd either go and drive there and pick up the food, or perhaps that takeaway had a driver or two who would then deliver it to you. As I said, this was not that long ago, and what you started to see was, coming out of this, was the aggregator platforms popping up. So you had your Just Eats, your Hungry Houses, who would aggregate all of your local restaurants onto one marketplace platform, and that's really all they did. So there was kind of a one-stop shop for you to go to that enabled you to improve the selection that you were looking at. Maybe it allowed you to explore other local restaurants that you hadn't tried before. And it enabled you to pay online, which was something that was relatively new. So you had wave 2, this online marketplace. This is where Will Shu, our founder and CEO, comes into it. So there were a few issues that Will felt existed in the space at that time. So there was no logistics there. The restaurant was still owning the end-to-end delivery service. What did that mean for customers? There was a potential reliability issue. You didn't really know when your food was going to arrive, if it was going to arrive on time. And generally, it took well over an hour. There's something that comes with that as well, which is there's a quality point when it comes to the food. So you could have 3, 4, 5 meals being delivered from one driver at the same time. And that meant if you happen to be number 5 in that chain, again, the food would be later than you might have expected, but also could be cold or it's been sitting on a hot plate for a while, so not great quality. So at the time, our founder was working in Canary Wharf in London as a hedge fund manager, working very late nights, and really all that he had available to him was going down to the local Burger King or picking something up from Tesco. And having moved over to London from New York, that was quite distressing for him. In New York at that time, and it's still the case now, you can pretty much get anything delivered. And that's where Deliveroo came in. He launched Deliveroo almost 5 years ago now. It started off as a very, very small operation. So Will and his co-founder Greg were the only 2 people in the business for a very long time. They signed up the first few restaurants in Chelsea and London. So the launch at that time was on a very, very hyper-local basis. So the delivery wasn't across London. It was only in Chelsea from a few restaurants. Will would do his deliveries every single day for the first 9 months, would be taking customer service calls as he's out on the road, and with the extra time that he had, would be walking into restaurants and pitching them and trying to get them signed up. And in the background, Greg, our co-founder, was building the site as it was at the time. And so we created this logistics-enabled marketplace. What does that bring to the customer that we didn't have before? So the first thing is increased selection. So if you run a takeaway restaurant that doesn't have in-house trade, it makes total sense for you to have your own delivery fleet. For the most part, there are some exceptions to this. That's your bread and butter, that's what you do, and having your own fleet to deliver that is a fixed cost, but you know that you're going to get a pretty decent volume that you can leverage that cost base with. However, if you own a business or a restaurant that is primarily front of house, actually the fixed cost of having a driver doesn't make a huge amount of sense to you, particularly if delivery is a small part of your business. And the other point here is that delivery or food delivery is a very, very peaky and very seasonal business. So everyone orders food between 7 and 9 p.m. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's very difficult to hire drivers just for that period of time. So you're paying a fleet, 1, 2, 3, 5 riders to work for you. However, they're only going to be utilized at peak. Then at peak, they're arguably overutilized. Again, you're going to have everyone ordering at that time, and those drivers might be taking multiple orders at the same time. So running the logistics independently of the restaurant means that it's fully flexible from the restaurant side. There's no fixed cost unless someone is picking up the food. It's easier to manage, as in we run the whole logistics end of the spectrum, end to end. And if you picture it as having this big fleet that can be utilized for any restaurant in the space, actually you're always optimizing for the next available rider or whatever is the best rider to take that food. And that means that you've got full visibility on when it's getting picked up, if there's any rider delay, when it's likely to arrive at the customer. That made it much easier for us to implement things like consumer tracking. So from a speed perspective, it was much quicker. And from a reliability and tracking perspective, it was something that was totally new for customers and improved the experience. And that's leaving aside the whole point of opening up a whole new selection to customers that was restaurants who previously wouldn't have delivered, that now pretty much every chain in the UK and a lot of independent restaurants now do delivery. So this is what we've done over the last 5 or so years. So this is where we were founded in London. This is when Will signed up the first couple of restaurants in Chelsea. And we've grown like crazy since then, as you can see. So this was the first bit where you've just got a couple of guys out on the road doing deliveries. Not very much growth going on there. I joined just here, so during the Series B round of funding. And this was the point that we just started expanding outside of London. So we launched some of the major cities in the UK, Manchester, Brighton, Birmingham, Oxford, Edinburgh, and we started launching our first international markets, so France, Germany, and Ireland. Since then, the growth has been absolutely unbelievable. What we find is that the demand for this product is pretty much insatiable. If we can get the right number of riders on the road, we'll be growing 10-15% month on month easily. However, running a logistics fleet that big has a big cash burn element to it, which is why we've raised nearly $1 billion of private funding. And our last raise was about 6 months ago now. One thing I'd like to state here is that it's one thing that has really enabled us to get to where we are today. It's not a business that you can run without having scale. And we've been lucky enough to have some of the best venture capital and private equity funds in the world backing us, all the way from Index and Excel, Green Oaks Ventures, DST in the early days, to Bridgepoint, who are a mid-market private equity fund, about a year ago now, maybe a little bit more. And in our last round, we brought in some of the biggest technology investors, such as T. Rowe Price and Fidelity. So that's part of what has enabled us to get to where we are today. It's building a logistics platform that's fully flexible for restaurants and for riders. And this has meant that we've done things like change the world of work. We've changed the way that restaurants operate. And we're at the point now that we're trying to optimize that, and we're building technologies and innovation into to really supplement that and to ensure that this steep growth curve continues for years to come. So this is where we are today. We have over 1.5 million customers globally, 30,000 restaurants. We're now actually at about 30,000 riders as well globally, of which half is in the UK. So the UK is still our biggest market. We average 30 minutes delivery time. We now have 1,100 full-time employees. And we operate in 12 countries, in almost 200 cities now. As I said at the beginning, our aim is to be the definitive food company. That means we're not interested in just being the treat that you order every now and then, once or twice a month. As it stands today, our customers order around once a week on average. That varies a little bit by geography. So in some places like in London, that's closer to 5 times a month. In some of our geographies like Dubai, that's 6 or 7 times a month. And so it really varies by maturity and demographic of the market. But the areas that we're focusing on now are designed to ensure that we can continue to bring the best selection to customers at a reasonable price and with a good service. And selection for us doesn't just mean high-end restaurants, your premium takeaway food, your local burger joint, or Nando's Pizza Express, whatever else. It means being able to order pretty much anything that you want at pretty much any price point at any time of day. So we're really working on building out the use cases. And we want to get to the point that we're feeding people 3 times a day with great food. And I'll talk a little bit about how we think we're going to get there. These are some of our restaurant brands that we currently work with. I'll focus a bit more on this later on when we talk about the kitchens, our own kitchens that we're currently setting up. So let's get into the innovation part of things. So we've built a huge engineering and product team. I think for a lot of people it's surprising that a logistics and consumer-facing business has such a huge product team. But everything we do is driven by multiple algorithms that we use to do things like predict order volume, predict the number of riders we need on the road, understand which rider should be delivering which order, which is far more complicated than you might think. We have algorithms and teams that are built around understanding the time it's likely to take for a restaurant to prepare a certain cuisine type or a certain amount of food. We have algorithms that look at potential rider delay. So if our network is under pressure, as in, it snowed a lot over the last few weeks, that means it's unlikely that as many riders would want to come out to work. That puts pressure on our network, and we have algorithms that predict what that delay is likely to look like and passes that on to the customer. And so the whole system these days is built off, I think it's about 12 plus different algorithms that manage the way we run the business. And at the scale that we're at today, there's no way we'd be able to do it without that. As I said, the complexity of running a logistics operation across 100 different towns and cities in the UK, 200 globally, 30,000 riders and 30,000 restaurants, with 200,000 orders happening every single day is an impossible task without having the right level of technology to back this up. We also made our first acquisition about a year ago, which is Maple. I don't know how many of you spend time in New York, but Maple was a well-loved food technology business in New York. So they developed their own food that they would then use their fleet to deliver to the people of New York. So we decided to acquire that business, first of all, because they had a brilliant team. But on the technology side, they really knew what they were doing from the kitchen technology point of view, which is something we hadn't done before. Everything that we had done operationally up until that point was on the rider side, was on the delivery side of things. So we acquired this business so that we could build technology further into the value chain and enable us to pass that on to our restaurant partners so that they can build efficiencies into their kitchens. We've built POS integration with some of our restaurant partners that we're still rolling out. That means that we can get even better data from our restaurants about how busy they are, what's happening, whether there's likely to be a delay on the restaurant side. And it makes things much more seamless from their perspective as well. When you get to the point of being a popular restaurant that's delivering hundreds of restaurants a day, plus your in-house trade, it becomes pretty difficult to manage without technologies like this that enable you to basically forget about picking something out of one tablet and typing it into your POS system. So that's been a huge benefit to our restaurant partners. And then on the business intelligence side, we're quite lucky in that we've grown the business in a very, very data-heavy way. I think it's partly because we're just a very new business and that just naturally happened. But from day one, we had an unbelievable amount of data about every single order that happens every single day. And that enables us to make much better decisions about what we should be doing. It enables us to understand what customers want, what riders want, and what restaurants want. And it enables us to get more and more efficient as time goes on. The better the data is, the better our machines learn, and the more efficient we get at delivering to you. And so an example of this is our rider dispatch algorithm, which we fondly call Frank. So Frank is the result of about a year's worth of work on a dispatch algorithm. We rolled out Frank about a year ago, and that reduced our delivery times by about 20%. It's a really complex algorithm that we're constantly working on. But when you add up the efficiency of something like that, alongside some of the other prep time models that I talked to you about, the rider planning models so that we can understand how many riders we need on the road at any given time, you can see a world where if we continue optimizing there, we can bring delivery times down even below where they are today. So what's next for us? We are going into infrastructure and own content. What does that mean? Infrastructure means our delivery-only kitchens. Some of you might have heard of Editions, particularly if you live in one of the cities that we've launched some of these sites. It's still in relatively early days, but effectively what we do here is we take underutilized space, that might be a car park or something like that. We'll stick in a load of delivery-only kitchens. Those kitchens will look pretty much exactly like the restaurant kitchens that you would get in-house, but with no front-of-house trade. We'll stick them all together. So you might easily have 6, 8, 10 kitchens all in one site. And out of each kitchen, you could pretty easily run 2 or 3 brands, and some of our restaurant partners do that. And so what we currently do is we offer these kitchens to our restaurant partners as a way to bring restaurant supply to underutilized areas. Birmingham's a great example of that, right? You've got a population of over 1 million people here, and most of the restaurant supply is very much in the city centre. This is something that we can bring to areas outside of the city centre in Birmingham to feed thousands of people. And it's great for our restaurant partners. So if you look at the cost structure of a restaurant P&L, usually you'll be spending 25 or 30% easily on the rental costs. And not only that, but you're competing against every other restaurant chain for those prime high street sites. So this is a way for restaurants to get into new areas with very, very low setup costs, to try new areas, to be able to roll out quicker, to be able to test new brands. And we've had a lot of restaurants who have started to utilize these spaces as ways to grow their brands and then potentially later on get bricks and mortar sites, or as ways to test new concepts. So this is a core strategic pillar of what we're doing at Deliveroo now, and something that we really hope to nail over the next year or two. These are some of the brands that we work with in Editions today. So you've got some of the existing big names, Franco Manca, GBK, Busaba. And then you've got some of the kind of smaller chains that when we first started working with them Editions, may have had only 1 or 2 sites. So Tommy Burger Joint only had 2 sites when we started working with them. UB only had 1 site, but they've been rolling out very quickly with Editions. And then this one is really interesting. So these few brands on the kind of right-hand side of your screen. So Motu is a delivery-only brand that was built by the people who own Hoppers, Gymkhana, and Trishna in London. So those are 3 very famous restaurants in London. Trishna and Gymkhana have a Michelin star. And I mean, I'm very biased on this. For me, Motu is the best Indian food that I've had in the UK, full stop. And this is a great case study for understanding why Editions is going to continue working for customers. Because if you have a world where your menu is fully designed for delivery, that you know that your items on the menu are going to travel well, that you know that you're not going to be distracted by in-house trade, where your packaging is designed to keep the heat in of the food, when you know when and where your riders are going to arrive, you can deliver a much better quality of food to your customers. And Cross Brothers and Buns are other examples of this. So, what are we going to do over the next couple of years? So alongside the continued rollout of our Edition sites and alongside the building out of our technology team, we want to continue growing our machine learning capabilities to get closer and closer to the point of running our business with artificial intelligence. We'd like to get to the point that all of our algorithms and planning systems interact with each other in what you call a closed system. So that rather than me inputting something into one algorithm over here and then something into an algorithm over there and hoping that that all sort of makes sense, you'll have a system where they're all talking to each other and will be able to flex up or flex down depending on the load on the network or how busy we are. We want to get to the point that we're doing personalized forecasting. So this is close to what you might get in some quick serve restaurants these days. So understanding what each individual customer is likely to order and when, and getting ahead of the curve on that. When you do that, you can start preparing the food in advance. So maybe rather than having a restaurant prep time of 15 minutes, that might go down to 10 minutes or even 5 minutes. We've started to work on supply chain sourcing. So if we have 30,000 restaurants globally, of which half is in the UK, and we have our own sites, we become something close to a restaurant chain. And if we are a restaurant chain, we're the biggest in the world. That means that we can go to some of the suppliers of things like flour or beef or gas and electricity, some of those other costs that all of the restaurants take on. We can then negotiate those for restaurants and bring down the cost of food even further. We want to automate things on the kitchen side. So one new part of our tech team is we're building out a kitchen automation team. This means that we'll get to the point where we'll have restaurant brands that are working in our Edition sites. We'll incubate new concepts that are working in those sites. We might franchise or license recipes from other restaurants that you can then put into a robotic model that can then churn those out almost as a manufacturing plant. And then actually the one that people always care about is the delivery robotic bit. This is something that obviously we're thinking about, and at some point we believe it will be the future, but everything else is going to come way beyond this. So everyone wants to know about drones, but that's probably, at this point, the least exciting bit of what we're doing. And so just to sum up, this is where we are today. We've built a logistics platform that has enabled customers to order from a very different type of restaurant. And now we're using all of these different innovations and all of these different bits and pieces on the technology side to ensure that we can bring down the food to customers. We want to compete against not only the existing takeaway market, which is what we've done so far, but we're going to get to the point where it might not make sense for you to walk down the road and into Pret anymore. We're going to get to the point that it might not make sense for you to buy a ready meal anymore. Because if all of these things work, or even if some of them do, the cost of getting a burger delivered to you is going to reduce by 30%, 50% very easily. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, great. Caroline, that's a brilliant presentation, and you've covered a huge amount of ground, and we have got 5 or 6 minutes to take some questions. Let me kick off. Clearly, a big part of the gig economy. So just starting on that one, what challenges are you seeing around that? Because you know, you're getting a little bit of sort of, let's say, negative press. We've seen what the Mayor of London has been trying to sort of suppress the Uber factor in London. Are you caught up in any of that?
Yes.
And what are the challenges going forward? Because this is exponential growth. Where are all those riders? Sorry,
Yes.
where are they going to come from?
So it's a very, very good question. It's a very broad question. So yes, obviously we are caught up in it. We've been heavily involved with speaking to government and other people about the area for many years now, so before it kind of came into the spotlight. So our riders are self-employed contractors. 85% of them do this alongside something else. So they want the flexibility of it. So that could be people who have other jobs and need to supplement their income. That could be people who are carers, single parents, maybe students. And so this is flexible, casual work. And that's something that is very, very clear from our riders that they want and that we need to continue offering. However, there's a real challenge here, which is balancing that against the security of other types of work, so employment. And we've been lobbying the government, and we still are, to find a way to ensure that we can not have to have that trade-off between flexibility and security. And we want to get to the point that we can offer our riders benefits such as accruing sick pay over time or maternity leave over time. And right now we're pretty hamstrung within the realms of the law that we can't do that. There are things that we are doing, and we do offer riders. So things like insurance. We've partnered with some insurance providers to allow our riders to benefit from things like that, but it's not the same. It's not anywhere near as close as the type of benefits that we all get from working in employment. So that's the biggest challenge today, and we'd like to move very, very quickly on changing that.
And the sort of, let's just use the word, the carnage that's going on in the restaurant business, particularly in the cities at the moment. I mean, there are 1 or 2 brand names up there recognised that are in a bit of difficulty at the moment. Jamie's Italian, for example, and 1 or 2 others. Do you think Deliveroo is having a direct effect on this? I mean, I guess this is sort of aimed really towards the millennials, but is this next generation simply not going to understand the pleasures of dining out? I mean, is dining out a sort of dying, is it a dying breed? People that want to dine out for that pleasurable experience?
It's not, no. So in most cases,
balance, right?
Yeah, I mean, in most cases, what we see is that the delivery trade doesn't cannibalize in-house trade. If you want to get dressed up and go out and have a bottle of wine with your friends or significant other, you're going to do that. It really, in most cases, doesn't cannibalize in-house trade. What we have found is that during the pressure on the high street and the downturn in the restaurant industry, having a secondary source of income, which for some restaurants can easily be 20 or 30% of their income, actually protects them against the downturn. And when you add on top of that things like us being able to help them bring down some of their fixed costs and enabling them to still grow through things like additions without having to invest a lot of capex in high street rents, what we found is that that's actually really benefited restaurants. And over the last couple of years, we've actually created over 10,000 jobs in the restaurant industry and the supply chain. If we continue growing at this rate, by the end of next year, we will have created 26,000 jobs and added $1.5 billion to the industry.
Interesting. Right, to the floor. So I'm struggling to see you guys. There's a question in the middle there, please. Name and day job will be helpful for Caroline.
Hello, I'm Ian Holland, Marketing Executive at Pratiga Global. I was going to ask if the rise in popularity of such a business of HelloFresh, where people are cooking from home with obviously fresh ingredients, encroaches upon Deliveroo. Would Deliveroo consider a similar setup where they deliver fresh food for people to cook at home?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, we don't really know whether something like HelloFresh has impacted our business. First of all, the scale is so much smaller than where we are. And secondly, the whole market is growing like crazy. So it's not that HelloFresh launches and our growth falls off a cliff. Our growth is still going like that. And what we wouldn't be able to tell is how much more we might be growing if HelloFresh didn't exist. But I think it's all part of the same space. There'll be a lot of businesses that benefit from this change in consumer behavior, including us, including HelloFresh, and there'll be others as well. Would we consider going into the meal kit space? Perhaps. As I said, we want to be the definitive food business now, and that's changed a bit from where we were even a year ago, which was being a food delivery business. So it's not off the cards.
Was there a question somewhere? Let's see, another question. Hands up. While you're getting the mic there, just one scary thought, picking up on that point about this balance between cook at home and eat at home and so on. At our conference last week, I heard something quite scary from one of the property developers, New York based actually, where they're building some apartments aimed specifically at the millennials. No kitchens. No kitchens.
Yeah,
it's literally 2 or 3 bedrooms and a bathroom, and your living space, but no kitchen, which is kind of a scary kind of thought.
It's a scary thought. I think
the cultural change that's going on in the next generation.
I think that's right. I mean, if you look at the culture in New York, anyone who has friends in New York, I mean, hardly anyone cooks there because the price of food is just so much lower. I'm not sure how quickly we'll get to that stage here in the UK or in some other markets, but I do think you're likely to get to that stage where rather than takeaway being the treat, takeaway is the norm, and buying ingredients and cooking something at home for your friends and family becomes the treat.
Over here.
Hi, James Fitzgerald, ecargobikes.com. I'm intrigued about your discussions with government vis-a-vis regulations which it would appear prevent you from paying contributions towards could be national insurance or health benefits, etc. Why? I just don't get the bit. Why don't you just pay them more so they can actually take out their own insurance and covering off the social concerns in that way?
So this is a popular misconception that we don't pay our riders very much, or that we need to pay them more, or that the reason that we don't employ our riders is that we can't afford it. So national living wage is £7.50 an hour. On average across the UK, we pay our riders £9.50 an hour. So that's already well above what it would be if we were employing our riders, paying them living wage, plus these benefits, plus taxes. Obviously, that average spans from in busy zones. So if you're in Birmingham city centre on Saturday or Sunday night, or London city centre, you might easily be earning 16, 18, 20 pounds an hour. And if you're working at off-peak, it might be different. So actually, we do pay riders enough, or actually more than what they would be earning if they were earning living wage plus the benefits. And what we're trying to do is set up mechanisms whereby we can facilitate them doing that. So it's not just every individual rider of the 30,000 riders that we have on having to plan and execute on their own insurance and finances and all of that. We're trying to partner with people that can help riders to do that.
Good. Caroline, fantastic. Thank you. A little straw poll back to the room. Was there another question? We'll take one last question, and then I'll ask you guys a question.
Thanks, Caroline. Dan Upwood from Q5 Consulting. Just really interested in terms of what measures you've put in place and what activities you've done in that very last 100 yards in terms of delivering into the customer, to ensure essentially you're obviously representing both Deliveroo but also all of those brands. And some, we heard earlier in the day, Argos were very keen to keep that very last touch point theirs. What is it that you're doing and putting in place to ensure that actually it's therefore worth people going that extra, that mile with you?
Sorry, is your question about what do we do to ensure that once we pick up the food from the restaurant that we're maintaining a level of quality?
Yes, and that it's then representative of that brand. So there'll be some brands that will be absolutely adamant that they need to earn those last 50 yards, because then that's a reflection. The interaction is the same interaction as in the restaurant or as in the food servery. So what do you do? So there's clearly huge amounts on the kitchens, huge amounts on the logistics. What are you doing on the service piece to ensure that that last step is just as efficient and as good as the other things?
So you actually don't find it as much on the restaurant side. You don't really find restaurants saying we need to own that last bit, that customer interaction where delivery driver is handing over the food to you. You don't really see that on our side. And when it comes to service, there's, for us, delivering the food on time and hot in good packaging that hasn't spilt is the best that we try to do, which in itself is already pretty hard. So there's very little in terms of, thank you very much, have a nice day, or anything else on the service side at that last point of delivery. And actually from the customer perspective, they don't really want that interaction.
Great, Caroline, thanks. Quick question to the floor then. Who out there is a Deliveroo customer? Who's had this? Who is using this experience? Probably about 50-50, I would guess. Right, hands down. One more question then. Who's going to give it a try after what you've heard from Caroline this afternoon? All of those plus a few more. Good. So it was worthwhile coming, Caroline. Look, thanks. That was a really insightful presentation, and thanks very much.
Thank you very
Caroline
much.
is going to come back and be part of a panel of experts at 2:45 when we're going to look in a bit more detail at delivery and customer experience in 2 or 3 years' time. So I'm sure we'll hear more from Caroline. In the meantime, please join me in giving her a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.